Who the hell are you? Jorge's voice cut through the cemetery silence like broken glass. The red-headed woman clutching the infant spun around, tears streaming down her freckled cheeks. She stood directly in front of his daughter's marble headstone. Isabella Santos, beloved daughter, age 7 paus, as if she belonged there. I'm sorry, she stammered, backing away with the baby pressed against her chest. I didn't know anyone would. That's my daughter's grave. His hand instinctively moved toward the gun beneath his black Italian suit jacket. 3 years of daily visits, and no one had ever dared intrude on this sacred ground. Funny, want to explain what you're doing here? The woman's emerald eyes widened as recognition dawned. You're Jorge Santos. Not a question. Fear flickered across her features, but she didn't run. Interesting. Answer the question. His voice dropped to that tone that made grown men wet themselves. But the baby chose that moment to let out a piercing cry, and something unexpected twisted in Jorge's chest. The sound was achingly familiar. Isabella had cried just like that during her last weeks at the hospital. Isabella was my patient. The woman's voice broke. At St. Mary's Children's Hospital. I was her night nurse during the cancer treatments. Jorge's world stopped. Hey folks, if this story is grabbing you already, smash that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. This one's going to be a wild ride through love, danger, and second chances. Hit that like button if you're ready to dive deep into Jorge's world. Now back to our story. The gun hand relaxed. Memories crashed over him, red hair beneath a surgical cap, gentle hands administering medication, a soft voice reading stories when he couldn't bear to speak. Rose, you remember? Fresh tears spilled. She talked about you constantly. Daddy with the dragon tattoo, she called you. She loved tracing it on your arm during chemo sessions. Why are you here? But his voice had lost its lethal edge. The baby's cries were subsiding, tiny fists uncurling against Rose's uniform. Today's my last day at the hospital. Budget cuts. They're eliminating night nursing positions. She looked down at Isabella's headstone. I wanted to tell her goodbye. She was special. They all are, but Isabella had this light. Even dying, she worried about everyone else. Jorge studied this woman who'd held his daughter's hand through the darkest hours while he'd paced hospital corridors, too afraid to stay, too devoted to leave. Rose Murphy, he remembered now. The nurse who'd never flinched when his associates filled the waiting room, who'd spoken to Isabella like she mattered, not like a dying charity case. The baby, my son, Mason. Pride and terror warred in her voice. 3 weeks old. The father, he disappeared when he found out. And you're unemployed. Rose lifted her chin defiantly. I'll figure it out. I always do. Jorge circled the headstone, noting how Rose protected the infant with her body, ready to run despite recognizing exactly who he was. Either brave or stupid. Maybe both. Isabella liked you. I liked her too. She was, Rose's voice cracked. She was brave. Braver than me. The October wind whipped through the oak trees, sending leaves spiraling across the manicured graves. Jorge's daughter would have loved this weather, jumping in leaf piles, demanding hot chocolate with extra marshmallows. 3 years and the grief still hit like a sledgehammer. Mr. Santos, I should go. How much do you need? Rose blinked. What? Money. For the baby, for yourself. Jorge pulled out a silver money clip thick with hundreds. Isabella would want me to help you. I can't take your money. You can. You will. He peeled off 5 bills. Consider it payment for the nights you stayed late reading to her when the morphine wasn't enough. Rose stared at the money like it might bite her. This is too much. It's nothing. Jorge studied her face, the exhaustion beneath defiance, the way she swayed slightly on her feet. When had she last slept? Eaten? When did you last have a real meal? I'm fine. Bullshit. The word came out sharper than intended. Rose flinched, and the baby whimpered. Jorge forced his voice to gentleness. Isabella used to worry about you, you know. Said you gave away half your lunches to other families in the ward. Fresh tears threatened. She was very observant. She was my whole world. The simple statement hung between them, raw and honest. Jorge never showed vulnerability, never admitted weakness, but something about this woman, this moment, stripped away his carefully constructed armor. She knew that, Rose whispered. She talked about your bedtime stories, the songs you sang off-key, how you fell asleep in the chair beside her bed every night. She felt very loved, Mr. Santos. Jorge turned away before the emotion could show. 3 years of therapy, of rage, of building walls around his heart, and this stranger could undo him with a few words about his daughter. Capítulo 2. Get in the car. Rose's head snapped up from where she'd been awkwardly juggling Mason and her purse while trying to hail a cab outside the cemetery gates. Jorge's black Mercedes idled at the curb, tinted windows reflecting her pale, startled face. What? You're exhausted, carrying a baby, and it's starting to rain. Jorge leaned across to open the passenger door. I'll give you a ride. Rose glanced around nervously. 3 other black cars had appeared. His security detail. Of course. Men like Jorge Santos didn't travel alone, especially not to vulnerable locations like cemeteries where enemies could corner them. I can manage. Rose. The way he said her name stopped her protests. Please, let me do this one decent thing today. Against every instinct screaming at her to run, Rose approached the car. Maybe it was exhaustion, or the way rain was starting to dampen Mason's blanket, or the memory of countless nights when Jorge had sat helplessly beside his dying daughter, while she provided the only comfort she could offer. The interior smelled like expensive leather and subtle cologne. Jorge reached over to adjust the heat when he noticed her shivering. Address? Maple Street, the apartment complex near the university. She didn't specify which building. Some details were better kept private, even from benefactors. Jorge pulled into traffic with the smooth confidence of a man accustomed to having the road clear before him. Rose snuck glances at his profile, the strong jaw, the silver threading through his dark hair, the dragon tattoo curling up his neck from beneath his collar. Isabella had been right. He did look like he belonged in fairy tales, though as the dangerous prince, not the hero. How long were you Isabella's nurse? 6 months, from diagnosis through... Rose adjusted Mason against her shoulder. Through the end. Jorge's knuckles tightened on the steering wheel. The last night. You were there. It wasn't a question. Rose remembered, Jorge pacing the hallway like a caged animal while she held Isabella's hand, whispering promises that everything would be okay, that Daddy was right outside, that she was loved beyond measure. Yes, thank you. The words came out rough, like they'd fought their way past barbed wire. For being with her, for not letting her be alone. She wasn't alone. She had you. You were the center of her universe. Mr. Santos. Jorge pulled to a stop at a red light and finally looked at her. Call me Jorge, and she had you too. Sometimes I think she fought as long as she did, because she didn't want you to be sad. Rose felt tears threatening again. She was worried about you. Near the end she made me promise to tell you that rainbows still existed, that they were just hiding behind the clouds waiting for the right moment to come out. Jorge's breath caught. She said that. The last coherent conversation we had. She was very concerned that you'd forgotten about rainbows. They sat in silence as the light changed, and Jorge navigated through the modest neighborhood where Rose lived. The contrast between his world and hers was stark. Run-down apartment complexes with peeling paint instead of gated mansions. Children playing in concrete courtyards instead of manicured gardens. This one. Rose pointed to Building C, trying not to notice Jorge's security details spreading out to cover the area. Overkill for delivering a single mother home, but she supposed men like him didn't know how to turn off caution. Jorge parked and studied the building. 3rd floor? No elevator? Rose flushed. How did you... The way you're bracing yourself. Jorge's observational skills were clearly still sharp. You're favoring your left side. Recent C-section? Emergency. Mason was breech. She gathered her purse and the baby. Thank you for the ride. And for... Before. Jorge reached into his jacket and Rose instinctively tensed, but he only pulled out a business card. My personal number if you need anything. Mr. Santos, Jorge, I can't... Not charity, a debt. His dark eyes were serious. Isabella made me promise to take care of the people who took care of her. I keep my promises. Rose turned the card over in her fingers. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. Jorge Santos, private investments. No mention of his other businesses, the ones that required armed security and made people whisper his name with equal parts fear and respect. I should go. Mason needs feeding. Jorge nodded, but didn't start the engine. Rose, the hospital, they're really eliminating positions? Budget restructuring, they're keeping day shift, but nights are being covered by rotating staff. Rose shifted Mason's weight. It's fine, I'll find something else. What if you didn't have to? Rose paused, hand on the door handle. What do you mean? I have a private medical facility, part of my legitimate businesses. We could use an experienced pediatric nurse for our family care services. The offer hung between them. Loaded with implications neither wanted to examine too closely. Rose knew enough about Jorge Santos to understand that working for him meant crossing lines she'd never considered crossing. I need to think about it. Jorge studied her face, reading the conflict there. Think about it, but don't take too long. Good people are hard to find, and my family values loyalty above everything else. Rose climbed out of the car, clutching Mason and the business card like lifelines. She didn't look back as Jorge's convoy pulled away, but she felt his eyes on her until she disappeared into the building. Capítulo 3. 2 days later, Rose's phone rang at 3 a.m. Rose Murphy. The voice was crisp, professional. Speaking. Mason was fussy against her shoulder, and she'd been walking the tiny apartment for hours trying to get him to settle. This is Dr. Angela Martinez from St. Mary's Emergency. We have a 7-year-old boy here. Gunshot wound to the shoulder. He's asking for you specifically. Rose's blood chilled. Who is it? Lucas Moretti. His father says you know him from our pediatric ward. Rose closed her eyes. Lucas, another one of her former patients, a leukemia survivor whose family had connections to Jorge's world. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Actually, there's a car waiting downstairs for you. Rose moved to her window and peered through the blinds. A sleek black sedan idled at the curb, hazard lights blinking. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Who sent it? The child's father arranged transportation. He specifically requested that we contact you. Rose knew she should refuse, should pack Mason up and disappear tonight before this world could swallow them whole. Instead, she found herself pulling on scrubs and wrapping Mason in his warmest blanket. The driver was polite, professional, and said nothing during the 15-minute ride to St. Mary's. Rose recognized him from Jorge's security detail. The ER was chaos. Lucas lay on a gurney, his small face pale but defiant as doctors prepped him for surgery. His father, Vincent Moretti, stood nearby, looking like he wanted to tear the hospital apart with his bare hands. Rose! Lucas's face lit up when he saw her. I told them you'd come. Of course, sweetheart. Rose handed Mason to a nurse she trusted and moved to Lucas's side. How are we feeling? Hurts. But I'm being brave like Isabella would want. Rose's throat tightened. Even facing surgery, this child was channeling Isabella's courage. She would be very proud. Can you tell me what happened? Vincent stepped closer, his face grim. Drive-by shooting, they were targeting me, but Lucas was in the car. His voice dropped to a deadly whisper. My 7-year-old son caught a bullet meant for me. Rose focused on Lucas, checking his vitals, assessing his condition with practiced efficiency. The wound was clean, through and through, no major organs hit. Painful but not life-threatening if treated properly. Is Mr. Jorge coming? Lucas asked. I don't know, honey. Let's worry about getting you better first. He came when Isabella was sick, every day, even when she was sleeping. Lucas's eyes were starting to droop from the pre-surgery medications. He reads good stories. Lucas. A familiar voice from the doorway made everyone turn. Jorge stood there, still in his evening clothes, a black tuxedo that suggested he'd been interrupted at some formal function. His hair was slightly disheveled, his face carefully controlled except for the flash of rage in his eyes. Uncle Jorge. Lucas tried to sit up, wincing. Easy, buddy. Jorge approached the bed with the careful gentleness Rose remembered from his visits with Isabella. I heard you're being brave. Rose came just like you said she would. She takes care of kids like us. Jorge's eyes met Rose's over Lucas's head. There was gratitude there and something deeper, something that made her pulse quicken despite the clinical setting. The best nurse in the city, Jorge agreed. You're lucky she was available. Dr. Martinez appeared to wheel Lucas to surgery. We need to go now. Jorge leaned down to whisper something in Lucas's ear that made the boy smile despite his pain. As the medical team wheeled him away, the hallway fell silent except for the usual hospital sounds. Thank you for coming? Vincent's voice was rough with emotion. He was asking for you specifically. Rose nodded, retrieving Mason from the nurse who'd been holding him. He's a fighter. The surgery should go smoothly. Rose. Jorge's voice stopped her as she turned to leave. Can we talk? Privately? Vincent took the hint, heading toward the surgical waiting area. Jorge guided Rose to a small consultation room, closing the door behind them. This wasn't a coincidence, Rose said immediately. You calling me here? Jorge didn't deny it. Lucas was asking for you and Vincent mentioned that you were unemployed. It seemed like a natural solution. To what? Jorge moved closer, and Rose was suddenly aware of how small the room was, how his presence seemed to fill every available space. You need work. My people need someone they can trust with their children, someone who doesn't ask questions and doesn't judge. Rose shifted Mason's weight, using the baby as a buffer between them. Your people? My family, my business associates, people who can't always use conventional medical services. Jorge's voice was matter-of-fact. The pay would be 3 times what the hospital was offering. Full benefits, guaranteed hours. The offer was tempting. Dangerously so. And the catch? Jorge smiled, a real smile that transformed his entire face. Smart woman. The catch is that you'd be working for me, in my world, with all that entails. Rose looked down at Mason, sleeping peacefully despite the chaos around them. She thought about her dwindling bank account, the eviction notice she'd hidden beneath a pile of bills, the formula she'd been watering down to make it last longer. I'd be treating criminals. You'd be treating children. Children like Lucas and Isabella, who didn't choose their circumstances. Jorge's voice softened. Children who need someone who sees them as more than just their last names. The honesty in his voice was more persuasive than any elaborate pitch could have been. Rose had spent enough time with Isabella to know that Jorge Santos was capable of genuine love, genuine protectiveness. The question was whether she could trust him with her son's future. I need time to think. Jorge reached into his jacket and pulled out a key. Take all the time you need, but while you're thinking, there's an apartment available in one of my buildings. Secure. Safe. No obligations if you decide this isn't for you. Rose stared at the key. You're serious. Dead serious. Jorge's eyes were steady on hers. Isabella liked you, Rose. She had good instincts about people. I'm trusting those instincts now. Capítulo 4. The apartment was a revelation. Rose stood in the center of what had to be a $2,000 a month space, holding Mason against her chest, while trying to process the gleaming hardwood floors, the granite countertops, the wall of windows overlooking Central Park. This is too much, she whispered to the empty rooms. Mason gurgled happily, apparently unconcerned with the ethics of accepting charity from a crime boss. Rose envied his simple worldview. Her phone buzzed. Hope the apartment meets your standards. J-My. Rose typed back. It's beautiful, but I haven't accepted your job offer yet. Consider it a trial period, for both of us. Rose set Mason in the brand new bassinet that had appeared overnight, another Jorge Santos production, no doubt, and explored the rest of the space. 2 bedrooms fully furnished, a nursery that looked like something from a magazine spread. In the refrigerator, she found fresh groceries and a note in elegant handwriting. Welcome. Maria. Maria. Jorge's housekeeper, the same one Isabella had mentioned in her rambling hospital stories. Apparently Jorge's support system was already being deployed. Rose sank onto the butter-soft leather couch and pulled out the business card Jorge had given her. She'd Googled him, of course. The results were fascinating and terrifying in equal measure. Santos Holdings, real estate development, import-export businesses, charitable foundations focused on children's health care, and then the other articles, the ones that used words like alleged and suspected, but painted a picture of a man who controlled half the underground economy in 3 states. Her phone rang, unknown number. Hello? Rose? This is Vincent Moretti. Lucas is asking for you. Rose glanced at Mason, sleeping peacefully in his expensive new bassinet. How is he? Surgery went well. Clean extraction. But he's scared and asking for the pretty nurse who knew Isabella. Vincent's voice carried exhaustion and relief. Would you be willing to visit? An hour later, Rose stood beside Lucas's hospital bed, watching the 7-year-old demonstrate his surgical staples with the pride of a war veteran. See? Only 12 stitches. Isabella had way more from her port surgery. You're very brave, Rose agreed, checking his chart. Everything looked good, no signs of infection. Vitals stable. Uncle Jorge brought me a new video game, but the doctors won't let me play it yet. Something about rest. Lucas rolled his eyes with dramatic flair. Rest helps healing. Isabella learned that too. Lucas sobered. Do you miss her? The question caught Rose off guard. Every day. Me too. She was my friend. Uncle Jorge says she's watching over all of us kids now, making sure we're brave when scary things happen. Rose glanced toward the doorway where Jorge appeared as if summoned. He'd changed from his tuxedo into jeans and a black t-shirt that showed off the intricate tattoo work covering his arms. The dragon Isabella had loved to trace wound around his bicep, But Rose could see other designs, dates, names, symbols, that probably told the story of his life in ink. "How's our patient?" demanding to know when he can play the new game system his generous uncle provided. The attending physician, Dr. Kim, smiled at Jorge with the kind of warmth reserved for major hospital donors. Jorge ruffled Lucas's hair. "Tomorrow, if your numbers stay good, but only educational games." "Uncle Jorge?" Lucas's protest was cut short by a yawn. "Sleep now. I'll check on you tomorrow." Jorge's voice carried the gentleness Rose remembered from his bedside manner with Isabella. As Lucas drifted off, Jorge moved to where Rose stood reviewing his chart. "Professional assessment? He'll be fine. Kids heal faster than adults, and he's got good instincts about his own body." Rose made a notation about his pain levels. "The psychological trauma might take longer to address." Jorge nodded grimly. "We're handling that too. The people responsible won't be an issue anymore." Rose didn't ask for details. Some knowledge was dangerous, and she was already walking a fine enough line. "Vincent mentioned you visited Lucas several times during his leukemia treatment. Whenever I could, he reminded me of Isabella, same fighting spirit." Rose closed the chart. "Children like them, they don't deserve what life throws at them." Jorge was quiet for a long moment, watching Lucas sleep. "No, they don't. But they deserve people who fight for them, people who see them as more than just casualties." "Is that what you're doing, fighting for them?" Jorge turned to face her fully. "Every day. Sometimes that fight gets ugly. Sometimes I have to make choices that keep me awake at night. But children like Lucas and Isabella, they're worth it." The conviction in his voice was unmistakable. Rose found herself seeing Jorge Santos not as the dangerous criminal from news articles, but as the man who'd sat vigil beside his dying daughter, who'd raced across the city when Lucas was hurt, who remembered the names and faces of every child who'd touched his world. "The job offer. Tell me exactly what it would involve." Jorge gestured toward the hallway, and they walked slowly toward the elevator. "Medical care for family members, mostly routine, annual physicals, minor injuries, the occasional emergency like tonight. Sometimes you'd travel with families who need medical supervision, always with full security, never alone. And if I see things, learn things..." Jorge stopped walking. "Then you forget them. Professional confidentiality extended beyond normal boundaries." Rose studied his face. "You're asking me to potentially treat criminals. I'm asking you to treat children and families who happen to live in a complicated world." Jorge's voice was steady. "The same way you treated Isabella without judging her father." The elevator arrived with a soft ding. As they stepped inside, Jorge added, "There's something else you should know, about why I'm offering this to you specifically." "What?" Jorge was quiet until the doors closed and they were alone. "Isabella told me something, near the end, about you." Rose's heart clenched. "What did she say?" "That you were like her, that you had a secret sadness, but you used it to make other people feel better." Jorge's eyes were intense on hers. "She said you understood what it felt like to lose everything, and that's what made you such a good nurse." Rose felt tears threatening. She was very perceptive. She was. And she was right, wasn't she, about the sadness? Rose thought about the past year, the pregnancy scare that led her to finally leave her abusive ex, the father who disappeared the moment he learned about Mason, the loneliness of building a new life with only a newborn for company. "Everyone has sadness." Jorge smiled slightly. "Not everyone uses it to heal other people." The elevator reached the ground floor and Rose realized she had to make a decision. Stay safe, struggle alone, protect Mason from this dangerous world, or trust Jorge Santos with their future and accept that sometimes security came with complicated strings attached. "When would I start?" "Yes, Capítulo 5. Today, if you're willing." Rose looked up from where she'd been feeding Mason in the morning sunlight, streaming through the apartment's massive windows. Jorge stood in her doorway holding 2 coffee cups and a bag that smelled like fresh pastries. "How did you get in here?" Jorge set the coffee and food on her kitchen counter. "I own the building. Also, you didn't answer your phone." Rose glanced at her cell phone, realizing she'd silenced it during Mason's midnight feeding and forgotten to turn the volume back up. "Is there an emergency? Vincent's wife is in labor, 2 months early. They need a pediatric nurse present in case the baby needs immediate care." Jorge's voice was calm, but Rose could see the tension in his shoulders. The hospital staff they trust is limited. Rose set Mason in his swing and reached for one of the coffee cups. "Preemie births are serious. They need a NICU team, not just a nurse." They'll have that, but they also need someone there who understands the unique circumstances of our families, someone who can handle complications that don't appear in medical textbooks. Rose sipped the coffee. Perfect temperature. Perfect. Exactly the way she liked it. Jorge had been paying attention during their brief interactions. What kind of complications? Jorge moved to the window, scanning the street below with practiced vigilance. The kind where rival families might see a hospital stay as an opportunity, where extra security needs to be coordinated with medical staff, where the patient's safety depends on more than just their medical condition. Rose understood. Vincent's family was involved in Jorge's world, which meant they had enemies. A vulnerable woman in labor was a target that couldn't be moved or hidden. Who's the primary physician? Dr. Sarah Chen at Presbyterian. She's delivered babies for 3 families in my organization, knows how to work around our security requirements. Jorge turned back to face her. Rose, I know it's a lot to ask. I'll do it. Jorge blinked, clearly expecting more resistance. Just like that, Rose thought about Lucas's trusting smile, about Isabella's whispered concerns for other children, about Vincent's desperate love for his son that had driven him to call her in the middle of the night. Just like that. She moved toward the bedroom to get her nursing bag. But I'll need someone to watch Mason. Already arranged, Maria will stay with him. Rose paused in the doorway. You were very sure I'd say yes. Jorge's smile was soft. No, but I was hopeful. Isabella always said you couldn't resist helping kids, even when it meant trouble for you. 20 minutes later, Rose found herself in the back of Jorge's Mercedes, racing toward Presbyterian Hospital, while Jorge coordinated security over his phone in rapid-fire Spanish and English. Elevator secured, 4th floor cleared. Dr. Chen is scrubbed and ready, he reported to someone, then switched to Spanish for a conversation Rose didn't understand, but recognized as dangerous from the tone. Everything okay? Jorge ended the call and focused on her. Vincent has some business rivals who might view today as an opportunity to send a message. We are taking precautions. What kind of message? Jorge was quiet for a moment. The kind that would hurt an innocent woman and baby to punish a man they can't reach directly. Rose felt ice in her veins. These people would target a newborn? These people would target anyone they thought would cause Vincent pain. Jorge's voice was matter-of-fact, but Rose caught the flash of anger in his eyes. It's why we take security seriously, why we protect our own. They pulled up to a private hospital entrance Rose hadn't known existed. Security personnel appeared immediately, escorting them through back corridors that avoided public areas entirely. Dr. Murphy. Dr. Chen greeted them in the hallway, already gowned for surgery. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Moretti is asking for you specifically. Rose followed Dr. Chen into the private suite, where Vincent's wife, Angela, was in active labor. The woman's face lit up when she saw Rose. You came. Vincent said you might, but I wasn't sure. Angela gripped Rose's hand with surprising strength. Of course I came. How are we feeling? Angela managed a weak smile. Like I'm about to have a baby 2 months early because this little one couldn't wait to meet his daddy. Rose quickly assessed the situation. Angela's vitals were good. Labor was progressing normally despite the early timing, and the fetal monitor showed strong heartbeats. Dr. Chen clearly had everything under control medically. Heartbeats? Rose noted the plural. Dr. Chen grinned. Surprise. Twins. We discovered it 2 hours ago when Angela arrived. Angela laughed through her next contraction. Vincent nearly fainted. After everything he's seen in his business, the idea of 2 babies was what did him in. Rose found herself smiling despite the circumstances. She spent the next 4 hours monitoring Angela and the babies, coordinating with Dr. Chen and providing the kind of calm, competent presence that turned a potentially traumatic experience into a celebration. Vincent and Angela's twins, Michael and Isabella, arrived healthy despite their early entrance into the world. Isabella? Rose looked up from where she was checking the baby girl's reflexes. Angela's eyes were bright with tears. Vincent insisted. He said Jorge's Isabella was watching over all our children now. It felt right. Rose glanced toward Jorge, who stood near the window maintaining his security watch, but clearly moved by the gesture. When their eyes met, she saw a vulnerability there that took her breath away. She would be honored, Rose said softly. 6 hours later, Rose finally made it home to find Mason sleeping peacefully and Maria reading quietly in the living room. How did it go, dear? Rose sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. Beautiful. Healthy twins. Maria smiled. Mr. Santos called. He said to tell you that Vincent and Angela would like you to be the baby's primary pediatric nurse. Regular checkups, vaccinations, any issues that arise. Rose looked around the beautiful apartment, thought about the day she'd just experienced, considered the life that was being offered to her piece by careful piece. Maria, what's it like working for Jorge? The older woman set down her book and studied Rose's face. He is a complicated man in a complicated world, but he is loyal to those who earn his trust, and he protects what he considers his family. Maria paused. The question is not what it's like working for him. The question is whether you are ready to become part of his family. Rose understood. Today hadn't just been a job offer. It had been an invitation into Jorge's inner circle, with all the protection and danger that implied. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jorge. Thank you for today. The Moretti family will never forget what you did. Neither will I. Rose stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, When do I start officially? The response came immediately. You already have. Capítulo 6. 3 months later, Rose realized she'd built a new life without consciously deciding to. She stood in the nursery of Jorge's Manhattan penthouse, checking on 6-month-old Michael Moretti, while his twin sister Isabella gurgled happily in her crib nearby. Both babies were thriving under Rose's care, their early birth now just a memory marked by careful monitoring and infinite family devotion. How are my godchildren? Rose turned to find Jorge in the doorway, still in his business suit, but with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. He'd been in meetings all day, legitimate business, he'd assured her, though Rose had learned not to ask too many specifics about Jorge's schedule. Perfect angels. As always. Rose lifted Michael, who immediately reached for Jorge with chubby hands. Jorge took the baby with practiced ease, and Rose marveled again at how this dangerous man became completely soft around children. Michael babbled something that might have been a word, and Jorge responded, as if it were a profound conversation. Vincent's downstairs. He wanted to see them before the family dinner tonight. Rose had heard about these monthly family dinners, elaborate affairs where Jorge's extended criminal family gathered to discuss business and maintain relationships. She'd never been invited, and she told herself she was grateful for the boundaries. I should get Mason and head home. Jorge looked up from making faces at Michael. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. About tonight. Rose felt her stomach flip. What about it? I'd like you to join us as my guest. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications neither of them had acknowledged directly. Over the past 3 months, their professional relationship had developed undercurrents that became harder to ignore each day. Jorge was an attentive employer, protective almost to a fault. He'd upgraded her apartment security, arranged for a nanny to help with Mason when she was working, even had fresh flowers delivered weekly because he'd noticed she loved the daisies in the hospital gift shop. Rose, for her part, had caught herself thinking about him at odd moments. The way he listened when she talked about the children, the careful gentleness of his hands when he held babies, the flash of genuine joy in his eyes when Lucas visited and showed off his latest school accomplishments. Jorge, I don't think that's appropriate. He handed Michael back to her, his fingers brushing hers in the transfer. Why not? Because I work for you. Because these are business dinners. Because... Rose struggled for words that wouldn't reveal too much. Because people will get the wrong idea. Jorge stepped closer, and Rose was suddenly aware of how small the nursery was, how intimate this space had become over months of shared care for these children. What if they get the right idea? Rose's breath caught. What's the right idea? Jorge's hand came up to trace her cheek, the same gentle touch she'd seen him use with babies. That I care about you. That you've become important to me in ways that have nothing to do with your nursing skills. Rose closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every rational thought screaming at her to maintain professional boundaries. Jorge, I know it's complicated. I know my world is dangerous, but these past 3 months, watching you with the children, seeing you become part of this family, Jorge's thumb brushed across her lower lip. I can't pretend it's just professional anymore. Rose opened her eyes to find Jorge watching her with an intensity that made her pulse race. What are you asking me? I'm asking you to trust me. To trust this. Jorge's voice was soft but certain. I'm asking you to let me show you how I feel about you. Before Rose could respond, Vincent's voice carried up from downstairs. Jorge, Rose, where are my beautiful babies? The moment broke, but the electricity between them didn't dissipate. Jorge stepped back, giving Rose space to breathe. to think. "The dinner invitation stands," he said quietly. "Whatever this is between us, we need to figure it out. And my family should meet the woman who's become so important to me." Rose hugged Michael closer, using the baby's warm weight to anchor herself. "And if I say no?" Jorge's smile was sad but understanding. "Then nothing changes. You keep being the best pediatric nurse my family has ever had, and I keep pretending I don't think about kissing you every time we're in the same room." Rose felt heat flood her cheeks. "You think about kissing me?" "Rose," Jorge's voice was rough with honesty, "I think about a lot more than kissing you." Vincent appeared in the doorway before Rose could respond, his face lighting up at the sight of his children. "There they are. How are Daddy's perfect angels?" Jorge smoothly shifted into his role as family patriarch, but Rose caught him watching her as she handed the babies to their father. The promise in his eyes made her stomach flutter with anticipation and terror in equal measure. 2 hours later, Rose found herself standing in her bedroom, staring at the black dress Jorge had sent over with a note, "In case you change your mind." Jefais. The dress was beautiful, elegant but not revealing, expensive but not ostentatious. It would fit perfectly into Jorge's world while making her feel confident and attractive. Rose picked up her phone and typed, "What time should I be ready?" Jorge's response was immediate, 7. And Rose, "Thank you for trusting me." Rose stared at her reflection in the mirror, wondering if she was making the smartest decision of her life or the most dangerous. Either way, she was about to find out exactly what it meant to be Jorge Santos's woman, because that's what tonight was really about. Not just dinner with his family. It was Jorge publicly claiming her, protecting her, announcing to his dangerous world that Rose Murphy and her son were under his protection. The question was whether she was ready for everything that protection would cost. Capítulo 7. Jorge's family dinner was nothing like Rose had expected. Instead of a formal boardroom meeting with dangerous men discussing violence, she found herself in an elegant private dining room, watching Lucas teach baby Michael how to play peekaboo, while Angela Moretti fussed over Mason like a devoted aunt. "He's beautiful, Rose." Angela bounced Mason gently, while his eyes tracked the colorful mobile hanging over the restaurant's family section. "Look at those cheeks." Vincent appeared at Rose's elbow with a glass of wine and a proud father's grin. "Angela's been asking Jorge when she could officially meet Mason. She's convinced he needs a dozen honorary aunts and uncles." Rose accepted the wine gratefully, surprised by how normal this felt. These were families, not criminals. Children playing, parents sharing parenting advice, grandparents spoiling babies. "Rose," Jorge's voice carried from where he stood with several other men near the far end of the room. "Come meet everyone." Rose approached the group, aware that conversations quieted as she joined them. Jorge's hand settled protectively on her lower back as he made introductions. "Gentlemen, this is Rose Murphy. She's been taking care of our children." "The nurse who delivered our twins," Vincent added with genuine warmth. "Angela and the babies wouldn't be here without her." An older man with silver hair and kind eyes stepped forward. "Anthony Castellano. My grandson Thomas has been asking about you since his hospital visit last month." Rose remembered Thomas, 8 years old, appendectomy, nervous about the surgery, until she'd explained everything in terms he could understand. "How is he feeling?" "Perfect. He told his whole class that his special nurse made the doctors promise to be extra careful." Anthony's smile was grandfatherly and genuine. "He wants to be a doctor now so he can help kids the way you do." More introductions followed. These men had children, grandchildren, businesses both legitimate and otherwise. They spoke about their families with the same protective love Jorge showed for Lucas and the Moretti twins. "Jorge tells us you've been wonderful with all the children," said Marco Santos, Jorge's older brother. "Isabella would have loved knowing you were here taking care of everyone." The mention of Jorge's daughter shifted the energy in the room. Rose felt Jorge's hand tighten slightly on her back. "She was an amazing little girl," Rose said softly. "She talked about all of you constantly. Uncle Marco who brought her ice cream, Grandpa Anthony who let her help in his garden, Lucas who made her laugh when she was scared." Anthony wiped his eyes. "That child was the light of our family." Jorge's voice was rough. "She still is." As if sensing the emotional moment needed breaking, Lucas appeared at Jorge's side. "Uncle Jorge, can Rose see my new magic trick?" "Of course, buddy." Lucas proceeded to perform an elaborate card trick that involved multiple false shuffles and a lot of dramatic flourishes. When he successfully produced Rose's chosen card, the entire group applauded like he'd just performed on Broadway. "That was incredible, Lucas." The boy beamed. "Uncle Jorge's been teaching me. He says magic tricks help you practice keeping secrets and paying attention to details." Rose glanced at Jorge, recognizing the life lesson hidden in the entertainment. In Jorge's world, the ability to keep secrets and notice details wasn't just useful, it was survival. Dinner itself was a revelation. The conversation flowed between business updates, family news, and the kind of gentle teasing that existed in any large, loving family. Rose found herself relaxing despite her initial nervousness. "Rose, Jorge mentioned you grew up in Boston," Angela said as they shared dessert. "Do you have family there?" Rose hesitated. "Not really. My parents died when I was young. I was raised by my grandmother, but she passed away a few years ago." Jorge's hand found hers under the table, squeezing gently. "Rose has been on her own for a while, building her own family." Anthony nodded approvingly. "The strongest families are the ones we choose for ourselves." After dinner, Jorge walked Rose to his car while their children were transferred to their respective families' vehicles. The November air was crisp, and Rose was grateful for the warmth of Jorge's suit jacket around her shoulders. "So? Verdict?" Rose considered her words carefully. "They're not what I expected." Jorge opened her car door but didn't immediately help her in. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. More criminal activity discussion? Less baby talk and magic tricks?" Jorge laughed, a real sound of genuine amusement. "Rose, we're family first, business second. The children don't need to hear about the complicated parts of our lives." "But there are complicated parts." Jorge sobered. "Yes, there are. And someday, if this continues between us, you'll need to understand those parts too." He cupped her face gently. "But not tonight. Tonight was about my family meeting the woman I care about." Rose's heart hammered. "And what's their verdict?" Jorge's smile was soft. "Anthony wants to set up college funds for Mason. Angela's already planning playdates. Marco thinks you're too good for me but approves anyway. And you? What do you think?" Jorge leaned down until his forehead touched hers. "I think I'm falling in love with you, and it terrifies me because the last time I loved someone this much, I lost her." Rose's breath caught at the raw honesty in his voice. "Jorge, I know it's too fast. I know this world is dangerous for people I love. But Rose, watching you tonight, seeing how my family loves you already," Jorge's thumb traced her cheekbone, "I can't pretend this is just about convenience anymore." Rose reached up to cover his hand with hers. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to let me love you, to let me protect you and Mason, to become part of this family in every way that matters." Jorge's voice was steady but vulnerable. "I'm asking you to trust me with your heart." Rose stared into his dark eyes, seeing the man who'd sat beside his dying daughter's bed, who'd raced across the city when a child was hurt, who'd welcomed her into his family's most private moments. "It terrifies me too," she whispered. Jorge smiled. "Good. The best things should be a little terrifying." When Jorge kissed her there on the sidewalk, soft and sure and full of promise, Rose realized she'd already made her decision. Somewhere between delivering Vincent's twins and watching Jorge make faces at babies, she'd stopped thinking of this as temporary employment and started thinking of it as home. Capitulo 8. "Rose, we have a problem." Jorge's voice on the phone was controlled, but Rose had learned to read the subtle variations in his tone. This was his dangerous situation voice, the one that meant immediate attention without questions. "What kind of problem?" Rose shifted Mason to her other arm while checking on the Moretti twins, who were napping peacefully in their carriers. "Someone's been asking questions about you. About Mason. Personal questions." Rose's blood chilled. "What kind of personal questions?" "The kind that suggest they know about your past." "About Mason's father." Jorge paused. "Rose, I need you to tell me about him, all of it." Rose sank into the chair beside the twins' cribs, her mind racing. She'd hoped her past would stay buried, that David would never find her, never care enough to look. "His name is David Richardson. We dated for 2 years in Boston." Rose's voice was barely above a whisper. "When I got pregnant, he demanded I get an abortion. When I refused, he disappeared." "Richardson?" Jorge's voice was thoughtful. "Any connection to Richardson Holdings? Construction company based in Boston." Rose's stomach dropped. "He's the owner's son." "Why?" "Because Richardson Holdings just bid on a major construction project here in New York. A project my family has significant interest in preventing. Jorge was quiet for a moment. Rose, this might not be about you personally. It might be about using you to get to me. I don't understand. If David Richardson discovered that the mother of his child is now under my protection, he might see that as leverage, either to hurt me through you or to gain advantage in the business negotiations. Rose felt the room spinning. Are you saying my past is putting your family in danger? I'm saying someone is using your past to threaten our present. Jorge's voice softened. Rose, where are you right now? Your penthouse with the twins. Maria's here too. Good, stay there. I'm sending additional security and I'm coming home early. Jorge paused. Rose, whatever happens, whatever David Richardson wants, you and Mason are protected. That's not negotiable. 2 hours later, Rose paced the penthouse living room while Jorge coordinated security arrangements over the phone. The twins were awake now, playing on their blanket while Mason dozed in his swing. Tell me exactly what happened when you left Boston, Jorge said, ending his call and focusing entirely on her. Rose had been dreading this conversation for months. I was working at Boston Children's Hospital. David and I had been together for 2 years. I thought we were serious, but when I got pregnant, she shook her head. He accused me of doing it on purpose to trap him, said he wouldn't let some nurse ruin his family's reputation. Jorge's expression darkened. He threatened you. He offered me money to disappear, a lot of money, when I refused. He made it clear that his family had enough influence to make my life very difficult. Rose picked up Mason, needing his warm weight against her. I was scared, so I took what savings I had and moved here. And he didn't follow up? Never tried to contact you? Rose was quiet for a long moment. He did. Once, about 6 months ago, he called the hospital where I was working, asked about me, but when they told him I'd left, I thought that was the end of it. Jorge stood and moved to the window, his body language tense. 6 months ago, right around the time you started working for me. Rose felt cold realization wash over her. You think he's been watching me? I think David Richardson is smarter than we gave him credit for, and more dangerous. Jorge turned back to face her. Rose, I need to know. Is there any chance Mason is not his son? The question hung in the air between them. Rose understood why Jorge was asking. If David had no biological claim to Mason, it eliminated one avenue of attack. No chance. David is definitely Mason's father. Jorge nodded grimly. Then we plan accordingly. What does that mean? Before Jorge could answer, his phone rang. He answered immediately, his face growing darker as he listened. When? How many? Jorge's voice was arctic. Jorge's voice. No, keep them downstairs. We'll handle this properly. Jorge ended the call and looked directly at Rose. David Richardson is in the lobby, with 2 lawyers and a court order. Rose felt her legs give out. She sank onto the couch, clutching Mason. A court order for what? Custody. He's claiming you're an unfit mother because you're involved with criminals. He wants immediate custody of Mason, pending a full investigation. The room spun around Rose. This was her worst nightmare, losing Mason, being dragged back into David's world of manipulation and control. Jorge, he can't just take him. Jorge was already moving, pulling out his phone and dialing rapidly. Vincent, I need our best family attorney at my building immediately. Emergency custody situation. He paused. Also, background check on David Richardson. Everything. Financial, personal, criminal history, if any exists. Jorge ended the call and knelt in front of Rose, his hands gentle on her face. Rose, look at me. She met his eyes, seeing calm determination there despite the chaos. David Richardson made a mistake coming here. He brought this fight to my territory, with my resources, against someone I protect. Jorge's voice was steel wrapped in silk. He's about to learn what happens when you threaten my family. Rose felt a flicker of hope. What are we going to do? Jorge's smile was dangerous and beautiful. We're going to destroy him, legally, thoroughly, and permanently. He kissed her forehead softly. But first, we're going to make sure he never gets within a mile of you or Mason again. As if on cue, Jorge's phone buzzed with a text. He read it, and his expression shifted to something Rose had never seen before. Pure, controlled fury. What is it? Jorge showed her the message. Tell your boss his girlfriend's bastard belongs with his real family. We'll be in touch about terms. Rose gasped. He's threatening you through me. Jorge stood slowly, his entire demeanor shifting into something that reminded Rose exactly who she was dealing with. This wasn't just Jorge, the devoted father figure. This was Jorge Santos, the crime boss, and someone had just declared war on his family. "No," Jorge said quietly. "He's just signed his death warrant." Capítulo 9. The War Room. Jorge, created in his penthouse office, looked like something from a political thriller. Rose sat in the corner, holding Mason while watching Jorge coordinate the most comprehensive background investigation she'd ever witnessed. 3 laptops displayed financial records, court documents, and surveillance photos, while Jorge's attorney, Rebecca Martinez, spread custody law precedents across the conference table. "David Richardson has 6 outstanding lawsuits for breach of contract," Rebecca announced, looking up from her research. "His company's been accused of using substandard materials and bribing building inspectors." Vincent appeared in the doorway with a thick folder. "It gets better. Richardson Holdings is $3 million in debt. David's been funding a gambling addiction with company money, and his father just discovered it." Jorge looked up from his laptop. "So this custody play isn't about wanting his son. It's about needing money." Rose felt sick. "You think he wants to ransom Mason back to me?" "I think he wants to use Mason to extract a settlement from me." Jorge's voice was deadly calm. "He's gambling that I'll pay anything to keep you and Mason safe, rather than fight this publicly." Rebecca tapped her pen against her legal pad. "The good news is that his custody petition is weak. He's never supported the child financially, never attempted regular contact, and his claim that you're unfit because of your employment is circumstantial at best." "The bad news?" Rose asked. "The bad news is that he's right about one thing. Dating a man with your employer's background could be construed as placing the child in a potentially dangerous environment." Rebecca's expression was apologetic but honest. Jorge closed his laptop and focused entirely on Rose. "There's a solution. It's not ideal timing, but it would eliminate David's legal leverage completely." "What solution?" Jorge pulled a small velvet box from his desk drawer. Rose's heart stopped. "Marry me." The words dropped into the room like a stone into still water, creating ripples of shock that seemed to touch everyone present. "Jorge?" Rose's voice was barely a whisper. Jorge opened the box, revealing a stunning but understated diamond ring. "Not just for legal reasons, though that's immediate. Marry me because I love you, because Mason needs a father who will protect him, because we're already a family in every way that matters." Vincent cleared his throat diplomatically. "I'll give you some privacy to discuss this." "No." Rose's voice was stronger now. "If I'm marrying into this family, everyone should hear my answer." Jorge's eyes never left her face. "And what's your answer?" Rose looked around the room, at Vincent, who'd become like a brother to her, at Rebecca, who'd dropped everything to protect a child she'd never met, at the evidence of Jorge's power and resources deployed entirely for her protection. Then she looked at Jorge, seeing past the dangerous reputation to the man who'd grieved his daughter with such devastating love, who'd welcomed her into his family, who'd spent the morning moving heaven and earth to protect her son. "Yes." Jorge's face transformed with relief and joy. He slipped the ring onto her finger with hands that trembled slightly, then kissed her with a tenderness that made Vincent clap, and Rebecca smiled despite the serious circumstances. "When?" Rose asked against Jorge's lips. "Today, this afternoon. Rebecca can arrange an emergency license and ceremony." Jorge's voice was rough with emotion. "Before David can file any additional motions or try to remove Mason from the state." Rebecca was already on her phone. "Judge Martinez owes me a favor. I can have you married legally within 3 hours." Rose felt the magnitude of the moment settling around her. "Jorge, are you sure? This is fast. Even for us." Jorge cupped her face in his hands. "Rose, I've been sure since the night you delivered Vincent's twins, since you stood beside that hospital bed and promised Angela that everything would be okay." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "I love you, I love Mason, and I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you both know how much you matter to me." "And David?" Jorge's expression hardened. "David will learn that he made a very expensive mistake trying to threaten my wife and son." 2 hours later, Rose stood in Jorge's bedroom, wearing a simple white dress that Maria had miraculously produced, while Angela helped arrange her hair. "You sure about this, honey?" Angela's voice was warm but concerned. "Marriage is complicated enough without adding legal warfare to the mix." Rose looked at herself in the mirror, seeing a woman who'd found her home in the most unexpected place. "I'm terrified, but I'm sure." Angela smiled. "Good. The best marriages start with a little terror. Keeps things interesting." A knock at the door announced Maria. "Rose, dear, there's someone here to see you. Says he's family." Rose's blood chilled. "Did he give a name?" "David Richardson. Jorge's handling it. But he thought you should know." Rose's knees went weak. Angela caught her arm supportively. "He came here to the wedding?" Maria's expression was grim. "With photographers and a process server. Jorge's not pleased." Rose moved to the window overlooking the building's entrance. Below she could see David standing beside a luxury sedan, gesticulating angrily at Jorge's security team while cameras flashed from across the street. "He's making this into a media spectacle," Rose realized. Angela joined her at the window. "Smart move, actually. Makes it harder for Jorge to handle this quietly." Rose watched Jorge appear at the building entrance, his body language controlled but menacing. Even from 5 stories up, she could see the dangerous energy radiating from him as he approached David. "I need to go down there." "Rose, no, Jorge can handle. This is about me, about Mason. I won't hide while he fights my battles." Rose headed for the door. "Besides, David's counting on me being afraid. It's time he learned I'm not that scared girl from Boston anymore." Rose reached the building lobby as Jorge and David's confrontation was reaching a boiling point. "Stealing children from their biological fathers," David was saying loudly for the cameras across the street. "This man thinks his money can buy anything, including other people's sons." Jorge's voice was deadly quiet. "This man thinks you should leave now, while you still can. Is that a threat? Are you threatening me in front of witnesses?" Rose stepped through the lobby doors into the afternoon sunlight. "No one's threatening anyone, David." David's head snapped toward her, and Rose saw his expression shift as he took in her white dress, her wedding makeup, the ring on her finger. "You're seriously marrying this criminal?" Jorge moved to Rose's side, his hand settling protectively on her back. "She's marrying a man who loves her, something you never learned how to do." David's face flushed with anger. "Rose, think about what you're doing. Think about Mason's future. Do you want him growing up around violence and criminal activity?" Rose stepped forward, feeling the strength of Jorge's family behind her. "I want him growing up around people who love him unconditionally, people who would protect him with their lives, people who see him as a blessing, not a burden." David's expression cracked slightly. "Rose, I'm his father." "No." Rose's voice carried absolute conviction. "Jorge is his father. You're just a man who contributed DNA and then disappeared when parenting got complicated." Jorge squeezed her hand. "David, you have 10 seconds to get in your car and drive away. After that, my patience runs out." David looked between Rose and Jorge, recognizing that his intimidation tactics had failed completely. "This isn't over." "Yes," Jorge said quietly. "It is." David stalked back to his car, the photographers following like vultures. As his sedan pulled away from the curb, Jorge turned to Rose. "Ready to get married, Mrs. Santos?" Rose smiled, feeling free for the first time in months. "I thought you'd never ask." Capítulo 10. 6 months into marriage, Rose discovered that being Jorge Santos's wife came with perks she'd never imagined. She stood in the nursery of their expanded penthouse, watching Jorge attempt to change Mason's diaper while conducting a business call in Spanish. At 10 months old, Mason had developed strong opinions about diaper changes and was expressing them loudly. "See, Vincent, the construction permits are approved." Jorge switched the phone to speaker while wrestling with diaper tabs. "No, I can't meet until after 3. I'm on daddy duty." Rose bit back a laugh at the sight of this powerful man, completely defeated by a squirming baby and a package of baby wipes. "Jorge, you're putting it on backwards." Jorge looked down at his handiwork and sighed. "Mason, work with me here." "Buddy?" Mason responded by grabbing Jorge's tie and attempting to eat it, which sent Jorge into full protective mode. "Rose, is silk bad for babies? Should I be worried?" "He's fine. Just exploring." Rose took over diaper duty while Jorge finished his call. "But maybe we should invest in some casual clothes for daddy time." Jorge looked down at his $1,000 suit, now decorated with baby formula and drool. "Good point." Vincent's voice crackled from the phone speaker. "Jorge, hate to interrupt the domestic bliss, but we have a situation with the Richardson investigation." Rose froze. They'd thought the David situation was resolved, after their marriage made his custody claims legally impossible. Jorge had used his considerable resources to ensure David's business troubles became public knowledge, effectively ending his ability to threaten anyone. "What kind of situation?" Jorge's voice shifted to business mode. The kind where David Richardson was found dead in his Boston apartment this morning, Rose gasped, nearly dropping Mason. Jorge immediately took the baby while keeping his eyes on Rose's face. Natural causes? Jorge's voice was carefully neutral. Apparent suicide, but Rose should know. He left a letter. Rose sank into the nursery chair, her mind reeling. What kind of letter? Vincent's hesitation was telling. The kind that blames his business failures and family disgrace on his inability to provide for his son. The kind that makes him sound sympathetic instead of like the deadbeat father he actually was. Jorge ended the call and knelt beside Rose's chair. Hey, look at me. Rose met his eyes, seeing concern and love there. I should feel something, right? He's Mason's biological father. I should feel something. You feel relief, and maybe a little guilt about feeling relief. Jorge's voice was gentle. That's normal, Rose. David made your life hell. It's okay to be glad that's over. But Mason will never know his biological father now. Jorge shifted Mason to his other arm and cupped Rose's face with his free hand. Mason will know his real father, the one who gets up for midnight feedings, who changes diapers backwards, who would burn the world down to protect him. Rose leaned into Jorge's touch, feeling the truth of his words. Mason had never known David as anything more than a genetic donor. Jorge was the one who sang lullabies, who made funny faces during feeding time, who'd already started a college fund and planned birthday parties. The letter Vincent mentioned, will that cause problems? Jorge was quiet for a moment. It might generate some sympathy press for David, paint him as a grieving father kept from his son by a criminal's interference. Jorge's jaw tightened. People like simple narratives. Dead father denied access to his child is simpler than deadbeat father who threatened to destroy the mother for refusing to abort. Rose felt cold fear creep up her spine. What does that mean for us? It means we're about to get some unwanted attention, media scrutiny, possibly some renewed law enforcement interest in my businesses. Jorge's voice was calm but serious. Nothing we can't handle, but nothing pleasant either. Mason chose that moment to grab Jorge's face with both tiny hands, babbling happily. Jorge's expression softened immediately. But this little guy is worth it. You're worth it. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Rose stood and wrapped her arms around both her husband and son. Together. 3 days later, the first news van appeared outside their building. Rose watched from the penthouse windows as reporters set up cameras and prepared for what looked like an extended siege. Jorge appeared behind her with coffee and grim news. David's family hired a public relations firm. They're pushing the narrative that David died of grief after being separated from his son by criminal intimidation. Jorge's voice was tightly controlled anger. They want to turn him into a martyr, and us into villains, something like that. Jorge sipped his coffee. Rebecca's handling the legal angles, but the court of public opinion is harder to manage. Rose turned from the window to study her husband's face. Jorge, is any of this going to affect your business? Your family? Jorge set down his coffee and pulled Rose into his arms. Some of it, probably. There might be increased federal attention on my legitimate businesses. Some of my associates might need to maintain distance until this blows over. Jorge's hands were steady on her back. But Rose, I need you to understand something. I made this choice with full knowledge of the consequences. You and Mason are worth any amount of scrutiny or inconvenience. And if it's more than inconvenience, what if they find something that could put you in real legal trouble? Jorge was quiet for a long moment. Then I deal with that when it happens. But I won't let fear of hypothetical consequences destroy what we've built here. Rose looked around their home. Photos of Mason's first steps, artwork Lucas had made for the refrigerator, baby toys scattered across expensive furniture. They'd created a family here, a real life built on love and trust and mutual protection. The reporter outside asked if I'd give an interview. Tell my side of the story. Jorge tensed. Absolutely not. Why? If David's family is controlling the narrative, because media interviews are not neutral territory. They'll twist whatever you say to fit their predetermined story. Jorge's voice carried the authority of experience. We handle this quietly, through proper legal channels, not through public spectacle. Rose understood.